You're listening to Play Therapy Community Podcast, episode 52.
Welcome to Play Therapy Community Podcast, providing connection, information, and inspiration to child therapists all around the world. Here's your host, a licensed psychotherapist, a registered play therapist, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. I am super excited about this episode. It is with a representative from the Dougy Center. I learned about the Dougy Center years ago when I was working as a therapist at hospice in my own community, and I loved hospice. But in one of the trainings, they showed us a video of the Dougy Center, and it was just beautiful. It was an older video, and they have some updated stuff that we didn't have available at that time. So when I was thinking about who to have on this podcast to share with you guys, one of the first people that come to mind, or first organizations that came to mind, was the Dougy Center. I myself wanted to really learn more about it and connect with them, but I'm so excited to share them with you. And today I have Jana Cristofaro, and she's a representative from the Dougy Center. Hello, Jana. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on as a guest.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for being on. Tell us a little bit about what you do at the Dougy Center.
I have a really long title. It's the Coordinator of Children's Grief Services and Volunteer Coordinator. And that basically means that I coordinate groups for kids, teens, young adults who have all experienced the death of a parent, a sibling, a primary caregiver, or a partner. Mm-hmm. And I also coordinate we have just about 200 volunteers that work directly with the kids and the families at our program. Mm-hmm. And I'm also the host of our podcast, which is called Dear Dougy. And I write quite a bit of our written materials that are available for families and for clinicians.
So it sounds like a pretty big program, especially with that many volunteers.
Absolutely, yeah. We have about 500 kids that come through the doors of the Dougy Center every month.
Wow. And you're coordinating all the groups and everything. You must be a busy lady, and podcasting.
Well, I'm grateful. We have an amazing staff of additional coordinators. We have about 27 groups, and I do 6 of those. So the work is spread around, thankfully.
Wow. So I am so excited to learn more. So tell us about, what is the mission of the Dougy Center?
The Dougy Center is here to provide support in a safe place for children and teens, young adults, and their family members who are grieving a death. And we also have a Pathways program, which we started in 2014. And in that program, we provide a safe place for families who are facing an advanced serious illness. So our whole program are peer grief support groups for kids and teens, young adults, and families who have experienced a death or have someone in their family who has an advanced serious illness.
So there's before the death, that advanced serious illness, just kind of preparing them and getting them ready for what to expect type thing?
Yeah, and really just the basic premise of having kids and teens be together with other kids and teens who are going through something similar, because both having someone in their family who is dying and also having had someone in their family die can be an extremely isolating, confusing experience. And there's so much power in them sitting in a room with other people their own age, knowing they're not alone, and getting to hear what they're experiencing come out of the mouths of other people. Or someone who can give voice to something they're experiencing that they don't even have words for.
Absolutely. It sounds a lot like group therapy, that just you can't do some work in individual setting because of that connection, and that I'm not the only one going through this is so healing.
Definitely. And to hear from someone who, when they say, I sort of know what you're feeling, you kind of believe them, versus, if you're working with someone, it's like, oh, I know how you feel. And like, no, you don't. I don't necessarily trust that you get what I'm going through. So there's a lot of trust and recognition and community that gets created in our groups.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, that's beautiful. Okay, so tell us about Dougy's story. How was this all created?
So way back in the day, Dougy Center started in 1982. And prior to that, your listeners might be familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is one of the pioneers doing research in death and dying. And a boy named Dougy Turno, who was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor, reached out to Elizabeth and wrote her a letter. And the basic gist was, how come kids get cancer? Like, what's the deal? And she responded to him in a very eloquent and beautifully illustrated, basically a storybook, but it was titled A Letter to a Child with Cancer. So Dougy and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed a relationship. And at some point, Dougy was traveling to Portland, Oregon, to one of our hospitals here for some experimental treatment. And Elizabeth reached out to our founder, Bev Chappell, who lived in the community, and said, hey, can you connect with Dougy and his family, help them get settled at the hospital, to sort of ease that transition. So Bev started spending some time with Dougy up at the hospital. And at that point, the general take was, these kids are really ill, many of them are dying, but we're not going to talk to the kids about that. So at the end of the day, the doctors would go home, parents and caregivers would go to wherever they were staying, and the kids would start talking. And they'd say things like, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm dying. Are you dying? And they'd say things like, I don't know if my doctor's very good because I don't think they figured out that I'm dying yet. And I don't think anyone's told my parents yet. So they're in this place of not getting clear information. And then they also started asking each other questions that kids ask each other. Like, do you think you're going to live long enough to go to prom? Or have you ever kissed anybody? Just questions like that oftentimes the doctors and the adults in their life were not talking with them about. So that really inspired Bev that kids can provide support to each other. And I'm not positive where the transition was with working with kids who were diagnosed with an illness to kids who've had someone die. But she started the Dougy Center with 4 boys in her basement in her home. And from that initial group of 4 boys who had all had parents die, we've expanded to the services that we provide today.
Oh my goodness, what a beautiful story. Wow. When I think back about how they didn't necessarily talk to the kids about dying, I think a lot of times it feels kind of scary for adults. They're like, oh, I don't want to tell the child something that may scare them or something they may not know. But in reality, they're so attuned. They know and they need to talk about it.
Definitely. I mean, as an adult, I would imagine most adults' first instinct is to protect their children. And underneath that is also protecting themselves, right? Because who wants to have that conversation and sort of face the reality of what's happening?
Yeah, because it's so painful, especially if they are part of the family or affected by it, like in an immediate way.
Definitely. It's so much easier to come together with virtual strangers and talk to them about some of those really painful, heartbreaking aspects of your story, knowing that, you get to go home and you're not going to see that person again for 2 weeks, and you're not going to have to negotiate chores and dinner plans and things like that.
Yeah, and I think too there's that element of if I tell my mom or my dad or my aunt or uncle how I'm feeling, then I'll make them sad too. So that you may not share fully. There's just so many good benefits to having a center like yours.
Yeah, so at our program, kids and teens and young adults have a chance to talk, but for a lot of kids and teens, talking is not their thing. There's no words for what they're experiencing, or it's just too hard to sit in one spot and try to verbalize what they're going through. So we provide a lot of opportunities for kids to express themselves in different ways. We have a variety of creative expression rooms, and in the video that there'll be a link to, you can get a good visual of what those rooms look like. But just briefly, we have a big energy room with an air hockey table and foosball and a punching bag and a beanbag toss. We have a room called the volcano room, which has soft cushions on the floor and the wall and big bears and blocks that kids can toss around. We have an art room. We have a part of our art room called the splatter paint room, which is exactly what it sounds like. Kids get to take paint and huck it at pieces of paper that it usually goes all over the wall and the floor instead, but we try to put it on the paper.
That's the coolest. Wow.
Yeah. And then we have a room that's a replica of a hospital room. We have a dress-up puppet show area. We have a music room, and we also have a sand tray area with trains and dinosaurs and figures and all sorts of opportunities for kids to create setups in the sand tray.
Wow, that's awesome. So expressive. I remember on the old video that we watched at the training, I think it was one of the early ones from the 80s where people had the big hair and the big glasses. They showed the volcano room in that, or I can't remember whether they showed it or we heard about it in the training. But that is such a wonderful idea because there's a lot of times the grief, especially in kids, can look so different. And it can look like just needing that expressive, being able just to let it out, whether it's anger or confusion or just a big outburst.
Yeah, and realizing that it's all types of emotions that could be expressed in that room is a big part of what we train our volunteers on too, is to not make that assumption that kids are going to the volcano room because they're angry. Mm-hmm. Kids could be playing the drums because they're angry. Kids could be quietly drawing in a corner because they're angry. Mm-hmm. So trying to extract our assumptions about what emotions drive certain behaviors and letting the kids tell us what's going on for them.
Man, that's wonderful. Beautiful. So what are some tips that you have for therapists that are working with grieving children and their families?
Yeah. Well, these tips are going to come from what we generally share with parents, caregivers, volunteers. Since I don't do actual individual therapy, it always feels like a bit of a mystery to me, like what happens behind closed doors. So I'm going to hope these tips translate well for therapists. Mm-hmm. And I think the first place to start is with ourselves. If we're going to be sitting with grieving kids and grieving families, we have to know our own story. We have to know our own experiences with grief, because unlike other challenges or issues we might face with the people we're supporting, grief is going to either have happened to us or it will happen to us. It's inevitable. And so there's not that opportunity for a barrier or an emotional buffer, I think, that can come with some other issues that we're dealing with. So it's really important to be clear about what grief have we experienced, how did we respond, so that we are not going to be putting our story onto the kids and the families that we're working with.
Yes, that's so true, because then it takes the focus off of their healing and gets into our stuff, and it could get just messy that way and not as helpful.
Yeah, and it can happen so quick, right? It catches us off guard where suddenly we're engaging in a line of questioning that's really encouraging children to do something that maybe we didn't do that we wish we had in the same situation. So if we can get clear, like, oh yeah, that's my own personal objective because I really wish I had gone to my dad's funeral, and I'm really trying to encourage this child to do that, versus asking this child, what do you think you want to do about your dad's funeral? Tell me about what your concerns are, what your questions are.
Oh, such good information, because, there's so many different elements that could be a part of the child's story that wasn't a part of your story, and their value system and their beliefs and everything. In therapy, we call that transference. And make sure you do your own work and it doesn't transfer over into the client's story. Oh, that's good. So that's a great tip.
So I say start with your own story, and then along with that, as you get real close with your own story of grief, make sure you're upping your self-care, because grief can affect us in ways that happen on all levels, and we might not even be aware of it. And so it can be really tiring. It can be agitating. It can be activating. So if you're a clinician and you're working with a grieving family, especially if their story is close to home for you, making sure you're taking care of yourself is definitely step one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes me think of, there's a metaphor about a flight attendant. When you get on an airplane, they say put on your oxygen mask, or in the event of emergency, put on your oxygen mask before you put on the one on your child next to you. And that's for the fact you got to take care of yourself before you can help someone else. So that's what that tip really reminds me of.
Yeah. And then the second thing I encourage clinicians to be aware of is oftentimes families are going to be asking questions about, what do we tell the kids? When do we tell the kids? Do we tell the kids? And so as clinicians, anything you can do to support families in being honest and forthcoming with children about what has happened or what might happen, along with, we mentioned earlier that instinctual urge to protect kids. And with that can come a desire to either not talk about the fact that somebody has died, not talk about how the person died, all kinds of ways. Even just the way we talk about death, sometimes there's a desire to say somebody passed on or we lost them. And with especially young kids, being really transparent and tangible and saying the words that grandpa died, his heart stopped working, that means his body doesn't work anymore. That can go a long way to help kids with any confusion that they're having about what does death mean.
It seems like that would help with the trust area as well. I've heard people say, Grandma went up to the angels or the Lord took them, and then, that instills so many different levels of confusion, and depending on, what they have going on in their life, it could really cause some issues. So
definitely. And you mentioned trust, and for some families, they say, well, I'm going to tell them it was this type of death, and then when they're older, I'll tell them what really happened. And one of the challenges with that is when you get to that older time and you tell kids what really happened, then you've got, how come you lied? And what else have you not been telling me? And so you've got all this mistrust and skepticism on top of just the pure pain of somebody dying.
Yes, and I could imagine that would really maybe complicate the grieving process too, if it was maybe a suicide death compared to they thought it was a natural death, so they didn't grieve in the same way, or they have all these new questions that they didn't even know.
Absolutely.
Really make it complex, I think.
And then the other thing that's going on is a lot of times kids know, even though we haven't told them. So now you've got kids knowing information that they feel like they can't go to their adults and talk about because they feel like the adults don't know. So they have to protect the adults from finding out the truth. So it gets multi-layered.
Yeah, like a cycle. And then it's all a big taboo, quiet, nobody's talking. Seems like that would cause some emotional issues.
The third thing I would say is to make sure people are really clear with themselves that grief has no timeline. And even though we might give that voice that we know grief has no timeline, there can be some inherent assumptions or biases that at this point you really should be over it, or you should have moved on from now, because clients will be coming to you feeling the same way. I was 7 when my dad died. I'm 26. Why is this coming up for me again? So as a clinician, to be able to say, yeah, of course you are. That makes sense. You're in a new developmental stage in your life. You're considering things like maybe purchasing a house or starting a career or entering a romantic partnership, even considering parenthood. These are all big life decisions that it makes sense that you'd be thinking about your parent and what it would be like if they were here, what advice or guidance or wisdom they would provide for you.
And if they have a I should, it kind of puts that I'm defective or something, what's wrong with me, when it's a natural part of the grieving process just to grieve developmentally.
And that's how that peer support group can come in so handy, of that huge ease that can happen when people are like, oh, you too? You feel that way? Oh, phew, I'm not the only one. I thought there was something wrong with me.
Oh, I love that. I love that. All right, so we're almost out of time. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like would be helpful for the listeners to know?
Oh, that I could say in 2 minutes or less?
I'll put you on the spot.
I think if you go to our website, which I know we'll talk a little bit about that, there's a lot of information that will help people take a little bit deeper look into supporting kids, supporting teens, how to support people after certain types of death. We've got tip sheets for siblings who've had brothers and sisters die. We have tip sheets for families when someone has been murdered or there's been a violent death. So there's a lot of resources on our website for people who don't live in the Portland area.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And I know you sent me a lot of links, so I'll put those in the show notes so that the listeners can get it. And also you provided a free download. So the listeners, if you want to look at her links or catch the show notes for that, you can find that at playtherapycommunity.com. And it'll be right on there for you to listen to and share with those who you feel like could use this information.
One other thing I would share is that there are over 500 programs that Dougy Center has been involved in training across the country and the world. So for listeners who aren't in the Portland area, there's a searchable directory on our website where you can find a program that might offer peer support groups similar to the Dougy Center in your home community.
Okay. Now, for those that don't go to the show notes, can you just spell out that address in case they're listening on iTunes or
Sure.
Stitcher Radio?
Yeah, we're dougy.org.
Okay. And then also let them know the name of your podcast.
Right now, our podcast is called Dear Dougy. We might be changing the name in the future, but you'll still be able to find it in the same way. And we have 52 episodes right now that are a mix of staff people like myself providing suggestions and tips for supporting kids and teens, as well as interviews with people sharing their own lost stories.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful resource. Wow. Thank you so much for being on the show, Jana.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work that you're doing.
Oh, thanks. Take care.
That was so good to talk to her. They are doing such wonderful work there at the Dougy Center. If you would like the show notes to this episode, go to www.playtherapycommunity.com and you can find them at episode 52. And also, I would love it if you joined us in our Facebook group. Just do a search in Facebook for Play Therapy Community. And we have a Play Therapy Community page. You can find that at Jackie Flynn, host of Play Therapy Community. And also, I have a Twitter. If you're an iTunes user, I would love if you would subscribe, rate, and review to the podcast. That would be wonderful. Well, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, take care.
To join our growing community for free, just go to playtherapycommunity.com and find us on Facebook too.
Thanks for listening to the Play Therapy Community Podcast. Until next time, bye-bye!